welcome back to the Lost Info Podcast. As always, it's keeping you awake, Jake, and the other Jake is out for today. He had something come up. But this case file, we're going to try to lighten the mood a little bit. I know we've had a lot of topics that kind of make it feel a little more like you don't have any control and depressing a little bit in some parts. So we're going to lighten the mood with a guest. And with no further ado, our guest is a spiritual teacher with processes of looking inside oneself. She is an author of a book, Pathway to Inside. She provides content and help on her YouTube page as well. She is a public speaker, a fellow seeker of knowledge and finder of info. Ann Hince. Welcome, Ann Hince.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Good. Well, so like I said, we're going to try to lighten the mood a little bit, go down a little bit different path. We have some topics sometimes that are just a little overwhelming at points. But I mean, in this crazy world, it's just kind of, you got to kind of take it on the chin. We like our fans to do research on some of those things. And, and then, like I said, we're going to lighten it up a little bit and go into some other kind of teachings and learnings of something not as overwhelming. But,
okay, we do have control. The control we have over all those subjects these days is how we feel about them. We can work with the feelings and we can let that go. And then that changes the way those subjects sit inside of us.
Yeah, perception is definitely an important key when you're taking in things. And it's just some of the topics we have, it's more like, the over control of the elites and whatever else and stuff of that nature. But again, it is how you perceive it. And I do have hope that we can still change things and turn things around, even though it's been a long time of their kind of control and reign over things. It doesn't mean that we can't wake up, which I think is important in this kind of topic, is the Great Awakening, I think hints to all of the stuff that you're teaching as well. So
indeed. Yeah.
Well, with all of our guests, we like to kind of get the backstory and bring up to current. So if you'd like to, maybe there was a story, I don't know if you'd want to tell it, but kind of how everything got started for you. I know that's probably a pretty intense story and our fans might enjoy that. So if you wanted to start there and then kind of how you got to where you're at now, would be perfect start.
Okay, sure. I had a lot of trauma in childhood. I think a lot of us do. Not all of us, but a lot of us do. And both my parents were alcoholics. And when I was 19, I woke up one morning and found my mother dead in the bathroom. So that was a pretty big trauma for me. But what I hadn't realized was how much I had held that inside of me. And it wasn't until I was in my late 30s and I was a stay-at-home mom with 2 young boys. And I went to a doctor's appointment and he recognized that I had a lot more stress in me than I should have done in that situation. So he asked me what my stress level was, and it was an 8 out of 10. And he asked me why, and I knew straight away, because that's what came to my mind first, was finding my mother dead in the bathroom 2 decades earlier. The tears from that were still so close to the surface, so I just hadn't dealt with them. So he used this technique with me called EFT. It's very popular. A lot of people know about it. It's short for Emotional Freedom Technique. He used it with me for about 15 minutes, and I walked away from that doctor's appointment being able to tell the story of her death to myself without the emotions there, without the tears there. So I knew that that was a big shift. Like I'd been, searching for things all along, but nothing had really lasted. Nothing had been, seemed like it was permanent. And this seemed like it was a permanent shift. So I tried this technique out with my cat a couple of days later. So I'm a software engineer, former software engineer. So I like to know things work. So I had a cat who needed a daily saline shot. And the first time I did that, my hand was shaking so much. I knew it's not something I could do every day because it was just too intense. So I thought this is a great test. So I tapped, it's called tapping. I tapped on the ends of meridian points as I was talking through my fear of hurting the cat, my fear of injections, my history around injections. And the next day, it just slid right in. All that tension, the shaking in my hand had just disappeared. So I thought, okay, this works. This does something good. So I started using it every day. I started noticing when I would feel emotional or react to something. Because at the time I had a very busy mind, a very fearful mind, and I was overly reactive. Probably people would say I was highly strung. So I started working with this technique and just using it every day. And then I wrote down a list of all the emotional traumas I could remember from my childhood. And I went through one each night. And I found my mind becoming quiet, which is what I wanted. And it wasn't until I got to this point that I could actually look back and see that the words that I had used in my mind over and over again to criticize myself or to judge other people, which I hated doing, those were words from my dad that I had been programmed with or had programmed myself with in childhood. And all I did was replay them over and over again. But I couldn't see they were my dad's until they had gone out of my mind. And at that point, I felt like I was living in a different reality because my mind was quiet. I wasn't judging myself all the time. And it was really nice. So that was the first step of my journey. It was an expansion of awareness. I had no awareness of how I felt. I was very, I had a lot of resistance to looking inside, feeling inside, any of that. So if someone asked me how I felt, I wouldn't know how to answer. It's like, I'm fine, just, that's fine. How are you feeling? So this gave me the awareness of my emotions and then a deeper awareness of the physical sensations underneath the emotions, right? Because if we have an emotion like fear, there are a set of physical sensations that we have that we say, I'm afraid. And it might be tension in the solar plexus, it might be tension in the jaw and the neck, but whatever it is, there's a set of physical sensations underneath, right. And I became aware of those. So once I became aware of those, I used a different technique that I call feeling your feelings, where I actually felt those feelings, the sensations in the body, hold my awareness on them. And when they're fully accepted, it just dissipates. So then I would think this thought that had emotions, feel the feelings, let it dissipate, think the thought again, feel the feelings, let it dissipate over and over again until the thought no longer had any feelings associated with it. And my mind just got quieter and quieter. And I started doing that on the sofa then at night, and I would bring up these collective traumas. So we're going through some collective traumas now, but at the time I brought up like 9/11. I would bring that memory to mind and all the physical feelings, the emotions around it, hold on to them, focus on them, feel them, and they would dissipate. And I just did this over and over again. And at some point, I realized that I could actually keep my attention, my awareness inside my body, which was kind of weird. I'd never heard anyone else doing this before. It was really strange, but I figured it was just the next part of the journey. So I just carried on with it. And then at some point, I could actually get my awareness inside my face and my head. And I do the same thing. I hold my awareness on the tension and I allow it to dissipate. And at this point, I had some x-rays taken just a couple of months ago, a new head x-ray from my orthodontist. And I could see the physical changes, that my eye sockets have aligned, my jaw has centered, my neck has straightened. So it's really nice to actually see the physical results and realize how powerful we are when we work with accepting ourselves at a deeper and deeper level.
Yeah, I don't think people understand that we have so much more to offer this world, but I think that's comes along with taking away a lot of the spiritual aspects of humanity. And I mean, obviously technology, we wouldn't be able to do this without it, but with all that, it's kind of quieting all the spiritual parts of us, and we just, I don't know, almost become robotic in the things that we do day in and day out. But ancient cultures have talked about many different things with being able to change reality through spiritual rituals or different kinds of aspects. One thing that you had said in there, which I kind of like, because it's actually in our logo here, the third eye symbology. The third eye, I guess it kind of linked to the pineal gland. And, obviously in different cultures, like the Egyptians, and they show this little acorn type looking thing. And I'm pretty sure that they were putting all the focus. Obviously, we don't know that only because it was in carvings, but pretty sure they were putting a lot of focus on the pineal gland that kind of gives these insights or connection to the spiritual world. If you wanted to elaborate a little bit more on the third eye symbology, that'd be good.
Sure. Well, I prefer the word in the inner eye, because to me, that means more to me, because I'm actually looking inside. I'm sensing inside, using what I assume is the pineal gland. I don't know for sure. I just know that I am looking from somewhere in the center of my head. I can tell what's above me, and I can tell what's in front of me and what's below me. So I'm assuming that is the inner third eye. And it's this whole process that I went through. I could actually feel it releasing. I think it's kind of stuck in us. It certainly was in me. And as I started working on the inside and was able to look inside, I would actually start to feel, actually I could hear and feel the connective tissue release. So as I moved to different places inside, the connective tissue would release. So I think that's kind of releasing the inner or the third eye to be able to see inside, in different places inside. And as I am able to see more on the inside, I actually can see more on the outside as well. So like I actually have a different perspective because my neck has loosened up, so I can actually look from different viewpoints that I couldn't see before. And on the outside, consciously, I can actually see things from different viewpoints as well. So it's as within, so without.
So you're talking, when you, just to be clear on the looking inside, so your perspective, is that like from like a point of view, like outside of yourself? Like, I mean, like inside, but being able to see from like the visual of it, or just the feeling of it?
It's hard to describe, but it's more a sensing. And I can sense light and darkness, but kind of like with my dad's voice, when I hold my awareness on some tension on the inside and it dissipates, at that point I can see it's light there now and it was dark. While I'm actually focusing on it, I don't know that it's dark, but after it has released, the tension is released, I can see, oh yeah, it was dark because it's light now.
Okay.
It's kind of a weird thing, but yeah, that's why, I mean, we talk about the lightness, right? Being the enlightenment process, the light inside and the darkness. Do you
teach that on your YouTube channel on how to do those kind of processes? Or
I do. I talk about the different steps that I went through. Okay. Yeah, but I don't think anyone could get to this last step I don't know if it's the last step, the current step that I'm on. I don't know if anyone could get there without going through the other steps first, because it's an expansion of awareness.
Would you say it's a challenging process to be able to learn how to do that, or just
I think
more
anyone
practice?
can do it.
Yeah.
It takes determination, and I was determined to change.
Okay.
So yeah, it does take that.
It sounds very interesting. I mean, I think with people like me, I'm always doing like multiple projects, and my mind's always, doing other things. So I think meditation, first of all, is hard for me, but I would love to be able to try to focus all that energy to be able to practice something of that nature, at least in just enough to, get my mind on one in particular thing, which I think that would be important in your scenario.
Yeah, I never wanted to meditate either. I never have. I don't call what I do meditation. I'm busy doing something, so I'm out of my thinking mind, but I'm in my feeling mind. Okay. So I am feeling, but I'm not thinking. And this process, you've got a busy mind. I started with a busy mind. Yeah. So I started with EFT, which is tapping. So it's just kind of noticing what you're thinking right now and accepting that thought. So, it could be my mind's really busy right now, and that's okay. Right. So if I tap through those thoughts, there are actually feelings underneath them. Right. So it calms you down, and then you can become more present. And it is a process. Yeah, it's indeed a process.
I would imagine that there's a lot more than just being like, hey, I want to do this and then do it.
Right.
So, I mean, and the awareness, I think that's, again, I think that's something that's also being lost with, all these social medias, your phone, everything else. Like the awareness, like you notice people don't even look up, like when they're outside or when they order food or what. It's like they're so focused on either a text or watching a video or whatever. And I've done it before too, even at dinner when, somebody's talking and you're just like, look down and scroll through some things. But I think awareness, just not even of yourself, but your whole surrounding in general, is kind of also being lost.
It is. And now I used to have, before COVID, I had a group and we would meet each week and we would do this EFT tapping thing. But at the beginning, we would all sit in a circle and we had a series of chimes and everyone would close their eyes and I would play the chimes, just one set of chimes. And then everyone would open their eyes and they would share their experience. And this is a great way to determine level of awareness, because the people who had less depth of awareness, at least for sound and vibrations,
right.
They would only hear the sound waves with their ears. But those with deeper awareness would actually feel the sound vibrations deep inside their bodies, right? So there's very different levels of awareness. So it's really good to share this information so that people know that there is a deeper level of awareness that we can get to that we don't necessarily know about. So I think that's part of what has been hidden. And that's why I'm sharing this story, because I had no idea this level of awareness was possible.
Absolutely. I think that's other cultures also had done the same things. They would, cover their eyes for days at a time and just pay attention to all the other senses that didn't relate to vision. And then they do the vice versa, so that they could hone in on each one of those senses. But I don't even think people really think about that much anymore. Just how vulnerable we really are when you kind of let all those awarenesses kind of go to the wayside.
Right. So the key that I found was it's like being aware of those sensations is one thing, but actually holding awareness on them so that they dissipate is another thing, right? It does take work to do. So, if you're feeling emotional around something, like there's so many things these days, right? Just think about politics or the planet or something and feel that emotion inside of you. Now, if you hold your awareness on that and just accept it, it's like, okay, I'm feeling afraid right now. And this fear, I can feel it, I can feel it in my jaw. I can feel it in my solar plexus. Just hold that awareness there. For long enough, it will dissipate. And I think that's the information that we have lost, because when it's dissipated, so I look at this through the law of attraction, and I look at the law of attraction as something that's working all the time, every second of every day. We are emitting a signal and we're attracting back based on that signal. So if we can relax ourselves and let that emotion out of our body, then we've changed our signal. And we're not going to attract that same feeling back again in the future.
Okay. And so in that regards, are you talking kind of like manifestation or do you really believe that that's possible or no?
It is, but I don't really work with manifestation.
The law of attraction, I guess, in my head, what I'm thinking is like when you really put that out into the world, whether it's verbally or write it down, like a lot of people say some of the techniques to write it down multiple times. Do you believe that's also part of that law of attraction that you're?
It is possible. I do have a chapter in my book about that. That's just not what I'm using it on an everyday basis, right? I want my signal to become pure so that I can tune into spirit as a pure vessel. So I know this is what really helped me earlier on when I started thinking during the day. It's okay, what am I feeling right now? And do I want this feeling again in the future? And if I don't, which is my answer a lot of times, if I don't, then I've changed myself right now. And I can do that with the EFT tapping. I can do that with holding my awareness on the tension and allowing it to dissipate, because then I've changed my signal and I'm attracting something different right back in the future.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. So, and I'm not very well educated, I should say, or or researched in the area of the chakras and those things. But like you had mentioned some stuff about the Kundalini, the Hindu teachings, I guess. But and I know that there's a lot of process to that, but you know, and I still kind of, you know, get confused on the, you know, I think there's 7 chakras, but then like the one, you know, aligning them and practicing that in order to bring out that energy to
Yeah, I didn't do any of that.
None of that?
I didn't do any of that. No, I
Okay.
just during this process. So when I said that I was lying on my sofa and bringing these collective traumas to mind, along with that process, at some point I was releasing so much stored energy inside of me that I started to feel this electric current inside of me. Again, it was a little scary to begin with. It's like, what's going on? I don't know. I remember walking down around my farmer's market, asking everyone I knew, it's like, do you know what this is? Right? Have you heard of this? And some people mentioned Kundalini, that it could be that. So I just worked with it. I just kept doing what I was doing. And this electric current energy, I could feel it. I could move it up and down my spine just by relaxing further into it.
I was gonna say, that sounds like what they explain.
And it went on for months. And then eventually, I think my whole system had realigned, readjusted to this lack of tension inside of it. And it stopped happening. And at that point, I was actually able to keep the awareness inside. So it was just part of that process.
Well, maybe that's a different technique to do exactly what they're doing, just in a different way. Because it seems very similar, because they talk about feeling this rush of energy or vibration or whatever that runs up and down the spine. So very similar explanation. Which I mean, personally, like I said, I would love to be able to do it. I just don't. I mean, like I said, the attention span of me is trying to get me to focus on one thing is hard. But I guess if there, like you said, if there's determination, it's possible.
Yes. That busy mind can change.
Yeah. And well, and the thing is, you just know that there's more possibilities when you start researching all these kind of, I guess, topics that have crossroads, and you're like, well, obviously, you know, many people and many cultures and have all talked about this. So there's something. And then, you know, people that really haven't tapped into that, you're definitely curious. So I had an out of body experience, and I don't know if that was astral projection or whatever they might have called that. But it freaked me out. I actually was standing over myself. I did one of their techniques. I guess when you're kind of in that paralysis, you know, right before, when you're asleep and you can't move. And then they say to, you know, imagine a chain coming down from the ceiling and like pulling yourself up that chain, and then kind of just roll out of your body. And I didn't really believe it. So I was kind of, you know, not the one that's the naysayer, but I just was, until I done it myself, it's kind of hard to believe it 100%. So I tried it, but it did work. This was a long time ago. I've never really been in that state of mind to be able to do it again since. But I was, you know, all conscious, looking over myself, and it was a little bit freaky.
So you were able to concentrate and do that.
Yeah, and again, they say that paralysis is kind of what the state of mind you need to be in, and it's like right before your mind falls asleep. But my body was asleep, and it was different, because I was like, okay, well, this is possible. So they weren't lying, but I think I scared myself back into my body, and I sat up, and then I looked around, because when I was looking at myself, I thought I was dead, but it was definitely a weird experience. But I know that just with that alone, the possibilities, they're all out there. It's just being able to, you know, train yourself to be able to get to those points.
Right. Well, I look at that. I look at the soul as living, you know, inside of our body, but the tension that we held from that we hold on to from our past, the emotions, the tension that's stored in our body, distorts the signal. It holds the soul in discomfort. And so I feel like, I don't know this for sure because I haven't experienced those out of body experiences like that. But I think if the soul is too uncomfortable, that's when death happens. Or if it's put in an uncomfortable position, then I think that's perhaps when we have those out-of-body experiences. What I've been doing, I believe, makes it's kind of freeing up the soul. It's letting those attachments go so that the soul can actually live very comfortably in this body. And I think once it's comfortable in the body, I have a feeling it's probably happy to stay around longer. Of course, time will tell, but that's my current theory.
Well, yeah, and that was actually a good segue, because I was gonna, your point of view on the soul, but you kind of touched on that. But I have the same feeling, is that, like, they'd say the pineal gland, it releases dimethyltryptamine or whatever, DMT, 28 days after conception and right before death. So I feel like there is, that is a gateway for the soul to come in and out, based on, just like you were saying. But when you're born, and then at the end, maybe in the discomfort, or, it's time to move on. Right.
Yeah. And I think that I think of it through the law of attraction again, right? If we are emitting a signal all the time and we're attracting that based on that signal, then if we've got tensions in our soul, it's got adhesions to it, then what it's attracting back is not going to be pure spirit. But as we let go of those adhesions, or this past emotion that we stored in our body, then it's going to be freed up and we're going to tune into spirit more. So that would be my ultimate goal, was to be a pure channel to attract, to tune into spirit. So it's going to be a fun ride, I imagine.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure you still have a lot to go. Like I said, I definitely appreciate the people that try to give insight on how to do this. I just, like I said, I think the one experience I had was kind of a fluke. I didn't really know that it would actually work. And like I said, I was in the right state of mind to be able to experience something that was pretty bizarre, which even when you explain it, there's a lot of people that just don't believe you. But, and even situations like you with having the energy running up and down your spine, and be able to look inside, and maybe like you either fix situations going on within you. There's just a lot of people that just don't believe that. But I think that we've also been trained in the Western world that anything other than medication and the hospitals is taboo. And I disagree, but
what's funny is the guy who developed EFT, this tapping technique, he had a similar thing. He had an out-of-body experience, or spiritual experience, and he developed EFT as kind of a way to re-experience it. But I actually think it does the opposite. I don't think he would experience that same thing again if he had done sufficient EFT, because that would make the soul much more comfortable in the body.
Maybe you could explain the EFT just a little bit more, because I'm not even that familiar with it as well. So maybe that'd be
yeah, sure. You're tapping on the ends of meridian points, so about 10 different points in the body. You're just tapping on them as you're saying your current truth. You might be bringing up something from the past that is emotional, which is what I did with my mother's death, but it could be something right now, right? You might be feeling stressed. So I could say, maybe even though I'm feeling stressed right now, and that's my truth in this moment, I'd start by tapping on the karate chop point, which is the side of the hand, and say that I'm feeling stressed right now, and that's okay. So you want to accept what it is you're feeling right now. And then the next point is the very top of the head, the crown points. Just tap on it, not too gently, but not hard enough that you're going to hurt yourself. And you just say, I'm stressed right now. And the next point is the beginning of the eyebrows. I'm stressed right now. Next point is the bone on the end of the eye, the edge of the eye. I'm stressed right now. The next point, the bone under the eye. I'm stressed right now. Next point, under the nose, on the upper lip. I'm stressed right now. The next point is on the chin, underneath the lower lip. I'm stressed right now. Then there's the collarbone points. I'm stressed right now. And then the last point is about 4 inches under the armpit, where your bra strap goes across, if you have one. And I'm stressed right now. And then you take a deep breath, let it out. And that's one round of EFT.
Okay,
so you keep doing that
process. Okay.
Yeah, you keep doing that again and again. And you can use the same words, or you can slightly shift them if the feeling has shifted or the memory has shifted. You just keep tapping until the emotion has gone from your voice, right? So you no longer sound like you're angry or frustrated or whatever. Okay. And the great thing about EFT is it gives you feedback. So people will start yawning, or they'll cry, or they'll sigh, or they'll burp. Something that shows your body is releasing the tension. And it's very simple and it's very powerful.
I was going to say, that's always good to get an answer when you're trying to, when you're doing things and you're like, well, if you're religious and you're praying to your God, it's like, can you give me a sign? Can you tell me something? So an answer is always good when you're trying to discover something or release something in that case. So,
yeah.
Well, I was going to say, if there, in your book, if you wanted to, elaborate on some of the things in your book and maybe give the fans a little bit about your book, that would be kind of good.
Sure. It's called A Pathway to Insight. There were probably other pathways, but this is one pathway to insight. And I talk about the law of attraction and the way I think of it, and how the whole of us is a signal, the different parts of us are the signals, and how we get programmed in childhood, because most of us are just replaying what we experienced in childhood. We're replaying those feelings that we stored inside of us in childhood. And so I talk about that, and then I talk about the different steps along the way that I took, and the techniques, that also the weird things that happened, like the Kundalini energy. There were some weird things that happened along the way, which is kind of fun to read about, I think. So that's it. It's basically a how-to book of get to insight.
Yeah, because I had, when I was reading about on your profile, it's the X-rays was one thing that I found interesting, but I wasn't quite sure when I was trying to picture how you were going inside to change things. But I mean, you did explain that a little bit better, because I was thinking, how is that possible in your perspective? But if you're honing in, like you said, if you feel that it was dark, and then like when you see it again, that it's light, that makes a little bit more sense.
Right. I'm really doing the same thing at each level of awareness. So with the tapping, the top level where I started, I'm actually holding, the tapping allows you to hold your awareness on the emotion or the physical sensation. So at each level, I'm holding my awareness on it long enough that it feels accepted and it releases. So first it's with the emotions, then it's with the physical sensations, and then it's with the tension in the connective tissue. So I'm just doing the same thing at each level, but at a deeper level of awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting, and I would recommend, I'm going to definitely check out some of your work and get your book from you. But I would recommend that everybody else that is interested in anything of that nature, that you probably, check out her stuff or practice at least the awareness. Because I think I'm pretty sure in our current time, if this great awakening is happening, I think that you're going to really want to be conscious on the fact that your awareness needs to be heightened to be able to receive whatever this great awakening, or if it's just within yourself. But I still think awareness is a big factor in that.
Right. Well, we're bringing up so much emotion with everything right now, right? So it's easy to find that emotion. So if we can just hold our awareness on it, which doesn't mean express it, right? If we feel angry, it doesn't mean express it to someone else. Just feel it in the body and allow it to dissipate. Because if we can do that, we can come together in peace, right? If we don't feel riled up inside when any of this stuff comes up, then we're in peace. And when we're in peace, we're attracting peace back to us, right? So if we can all do that, we can all let the emotions just pass through and be gone out of our bodies so that we can sit in peace, then that's what we're attracting back.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a really good point right now too, because I see it every day, but like some of these certain situations, which we won't get into on this, but it seems like it's a divide right down to the point of they just, and I don't know, when I say we went over this many times, people call them elites, Illuminatis, whatever else, certain families that are like controlling these scenarios, but you see it with race, you see it with politics and the divide. And then I think it's holding on to that anger. It's like, you start to look at your friend that, has a different political view. And then I don't know, a lot of people and lately have took that stance, like, well, I can't cross the line because this isn't what my party or the people that are running these beliefs. And I think you can see it in society every day that like these angers are like towards people that you don't even know. Right. And it's damaging.
Right. But we can always bring it back to us. Right. So how do we feel about that?
Yeah.
Right. How do we feel about seeing the division? Right. We can tap on the frustration or the anger that everyone is so divided. Right. It's disappointing. There's a bunch of emotions that are there.
It's disappointing more than, to me, it's more disappointed that, because I've seen people get on these, these rants or whatever else, and then they hold that line in the sand on their view. And then by the end of these discussions or whatever that I've seen, it's like, you can just, defriend me and blah, blah, blah. And so it gets to a point of, it's like, all right, well, you didn't solve anything. And now you lost a possible friend over, nothing really. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not really in those situations particularly. And then people take such a hard stance that they're just too angry to even continue a friendship, which is
right. And you can see that, right, just in the words, right, a hard stance, right? That's a physical tension in the body. So if people can tap when they're ranting, right, even go in the bathroom and tap and rant to yourself until the emotion has gone from it, because once the emotion is gone from it, compassion and understanding arises. It's just there underneath all those emotions.
And I'm guilty of it. I mean, I'm guilty of feeling frustrated and things like that, but I wouldn't go to the extent of, defriending somebody about it. I would rather have a debate and then you bring, points on your side and I bring points on my side and see if we can't figure out, that we're looking at this, slightly different, but we all want the same thing, So I wouldn't go to that extent, but I do definitely feel the emotion behind. I'm very passionate about a lot of things I do. So I mean, I've got into it with my dad, everything else. I mean, but an hour later, we're fine. But yeah, we'll get to the point where we're, voicing our opinions pretty loud and then gets in a heated little thing. And then we kind of separate, come back and we're over it. But,
right. So if you knew EFT and were doing that, you're just talking to your dad on the phone and you were tapping on yourself as you were talking and getting riled up with him, then you wouldn't get as riled up.
Yeah, and I might actually use that technique because I've definitely got riled up a few times talking to people like, what are you missing? And then, then they come back with whatever. But yeah, I think it's healthy to have a debate, but I also think it'd be healthier to have a way to separate that emotion, to not let it get worse and come to more of a conclusion, at least within yourself. And not get too angry.
To have a debate without the emotions coming up is a very different debate, right? To have a debate from peace where you can understand where the other person is coming from.
Comes
even
the
though
logic.
if you don't, right, even if you don't agree with them, you can understand it and you don't have to push against them.
Well, I was going to say that becomes more logic, and then you're not having the emotion behind it. The emotion is what triggers you, depending on your belief. That is what triggers that, either that hate or whatever else. But if you can come to a point of, being calm when you're thinking about these things, then I do think that would be a healthier way to come to a conclusion with logic instead of just taking that hard stance and the emotion. For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Again, this is a realm that I'm not too good at, I should say. I try to practice things that would be helpful. One, like I said, it's always been hard for me to meditate. I used to try to do that, and my mind's just all over the place. It just doesn't quiet down. So maybe this technique might even help me. Hopefully, some of our fans that may try it, it helps them too. If there's anything else you'd like to add, because I mean, as far as this goes, I don't know really where to lead you on maybe things that you want to talk about, but you're more than welcome to dive into anywhere. if you'd like.
Okay, well, I would really encourage people to just become the first level of awareness is just to become aware of how emotional you are during the day, right?
Yeah.
Actually not get caught up in the emotion, but actually see yourself becoming emotional. And because at that point you can step back and say, okay, yeah, I'm becoming emotional now. I can see that, right? And then that's just the first level. And to begin with, it's like it would only happen to be once or twice a day. I could just catch myself. But then as you do this more and more, you become more and more able to catch it ahead of time before you get too caught up in the emotion. And then things really start to change.
Yeah, I was going to say, I when I'm thinking about just right now, just thinking about the emotions throughout the day, it changes so many times that I find, like, you know, if I'm at work or whatever else, if you can at your job, on my other job, not this, but to put on music, like a certain kind of music can change your mood so fast that it's like, you know, any way that you can, I guess, to get over certain things, like when you get frustrated or if you're too fast paced at work and you just like you can't catch up mentally and whatever else, just take a little break or put on a song, a good relaxing song, and go from there to kind of change your mood.
Yeah, and you're changing your vibration, you're changing your signal you're emitting.
Yeah.
That kind of brings it back to, you know, there's a lot of people talking about toxic positivity these days. So what that is when you try and think something that you're not actually thinking, you're suppressing the actual thought that you are thinking or the feelings that you're having with that thought. So this work is actually finding and accepting what you're actually thinking or feeling in the moment and working with that. And once you accept that, then a more positive thought comes to you naturally. So you don't actually have to go and find one. But so that's what people talk about with the toxic positivity these days.
Well, I was going to say that makes sense too, because I feel that when you get frustrated with somebody or whatever else, instead of like focusing on that feeling, you kind of suppress it. And then it tends to come out on other people and other ways in your life. And you're just like, I didn't really want to do that. It's just that, you know, that feeling's still there because you never really addressed it. So I definitely agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. It stays in the body. It doesn't disappear if you do something else. Yeah, it just stays in the body. But this work, the tapping or the feeling for long enough that it dissipates, that actually gets it out of the body and it changes. That's really, it's a permanent change. There will be more levels for sure, but it's really, it's a different change than a lot of the you know, the positive stuff that goes on out there.
I'm definitely going to attempt some of these techniques, because just talking to you right now, just thinking about it, I'm like, I probably do that quite often, is like, you know, somebody calls or whatever else, and I'm thinking about something else and they never really address the emotion of it. And then it's kind of like, hey, yeah, I'm kind of in a hurry and whatever else, instead of being in the moment and focusing on what they're saying. So I definitely, like I said, everybody should probably practice those kind of techniques. It definitely couldn't make anything worse. So, you know, but with that, I mean, I really appreciate your time. And maybe if, we have some new cases that come across these things, or we have questions on people that email us in at the lostinfopodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions for Ann or whatever else, or me, that we can have her back on and address some things, I think that'd be great. So
sure, that'd be great. And I'd encourage people, if you're on Facebook, I don't know if you're on Facebook, but if you're on Facebook, I have a public Facebook page that I'm responding to a lot of the memes out there. I don't believe they're really beneficial necessarily. So I'm kind of giving my explanation through what I've been through, my explanation of those on my Facebook page. So if you want to check that out, that's great too.
And I will have Ann's YouTube page, and actually I'll probably put all the links if you want to send them to me. But I'll put all the links on the show notes below. So if you'd like to ask her questions or whatever else. But yeah, I would think that this is beneficial to a lot of people, because even me, just thinking right now, there's a lot of things that you don't address throughout the day that might make this life a little bit more enjoyable when you can calm some of the feelings. So I do appreciate it, Ann. And like I said, we'll keep the channel open, and that way we can visit again sometime soon.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun. And I appreciate your time.
Okay.
All right.